Hey y'all, welcome to a Holy Rust revival. We're going to be tinkering on a tractor today. And by the way, my nephew Tristan loves tractors, so here's a shout out. This one's for you, buddy. This is a 1941 John Deere B. And this has been in the family since 1941. This belonged to an uncle of mine on my grandmother's side. And up until COVID, about 2 to 3 years ago, this tractor has been sitting in the barn for 50 years. It has not moved. It's been sitting in the barn longer than I have been alive. I had never seen this tractor operate, but I'd always seen it in the barn. And it was on my bucket list one day to get it running again. Of course, it got pushed way down to that list with all the stuff that's stays broken on the farm. However, during COVID, had a little time on my hands, and I decided to get this old bad boy running. Now, it wasn't real easy. Squirrels had built all inside the radiator and in the hoses going into the engine, and I even found acorns inside the engine block when I took it all apart. Dirt daubers had completely stopped up the air intake. I had to actually cut it, get all the dirt daubers out, and weld that back up. The wheels were rusted. I had to actually weld and recreate some of the wheels by cutting out some pieces off of old rims that I found in the junk pile back there. The rear wheels were the same. And in 1941, they used a special style wheel that I just can't find anymore. So I had to actually recreate portions of those wheels. Besides that, it had been sitting for 50 years, so you know how things are stove up. But I got her going. So today's episode is going to be about how to crank a 1941 John Deere B. I know that may sound silly, but there's actually an art to it. And if any of you have ever cranked one of these old tractors, you know you don't just hit a starter button and crank it up. You actually have to spin this old flywheel right here. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm probably going to get winded in this episode. It's not easy to crank, but it doesn't have a battery. It creates its own electrical energy and a magneto. It's dirt simple. And here it is. How many years later? 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 80 years? 70, 80 years later, this joker is still running, and I actually plow with it in the garden. So I'm going to show you my recipe for cranking an old flywheel John Deere. Now let me preface all of that by saying everybody's tractor is a little bit different. All of these old tractors have different personalities, and what I do, don't take it for the gospel truth, but understand and know that I have found the secret to getting my tractor started. And I'll be honest with you, I haven't got it dialed in completely all the way. There's still some fine-tuned adjustments I need to make, but she's running, and she runs strong. So let me get the camera. Let's do a little walk around of the tractor. Let me show you a few things, and then let's get set back up to actually crank this old bad boy up. All right, so you may notice this engine is a horizontal piston engine. The pistons actually go in and out this way. On the more modern tractors, it's a vertical piston, up and down. Interesting setup here. The pistons are large, very large. There's only two, and they're, matter of fact, I got pistons over here. Let me show you. These are the original pistons that came out of the old tractor. Look how large they are. They're bigger than quart oil cans, actually. So thought you might like to see that. That's why the old John Deeres have so much torque. They got big old pistons, and they have long strokes. The actual piston stroke is very, very long. So it's not a normal clutch like a regular normal tractor. It's actually a hand clutch. So in order to operate the clutch, you pull it forward and click, and that engages the clutch, which is inside this housing here. And by the way, look at how easy it is to get to a clutch. You don't have to break this tractor in half to put a clutch in it. You basically just pop this lid off, and the clutches are right here. So you can change the clutches out in about 15 or 20 minutes on this old tractor. Very, very simple. It's got 2 brakes. These are the brake drums. Again, very simple to change the brakes out. That's your right brake. That's your left brake. So you can actually spin this thing on a dime by hitting one brake or the other and locking these big old wheels up. And seeing how it's a tricycle front end, you can just spin that thing around a dime. When you get through plowing, at the end of the road, you hit one of those brakes and turn right back around on the road and go back the other direction. So real easy to operate. Now, this tractor originally had steel wheels on it, I'm convinced, because these are aftermarket wheels. I did find that out. Also, another dead giveaway is that when these tractors came with steel wheels, you hear how that clicks into gear? You click in down here, you click in down there. But listen to this. There's no clicking in that top gear. Do you actually not hear that? Like that gear? So in order to keep the old steel wheels from getting too fast and out of control, because you didn't want to spin them very fast, from the factory they left the 5th and 6th gear out. They just did not connect it in the transmission. Even though the hole is still there, it is not actually engaging inside the transmission. So that's why I also believe that this tractor came from the factory with steel wheels on them instead of rubber wheels. And I also heard a story of my uncle who actually got run over by the tractor, and that's when they converted it from metal to rubber. I don't know how true that story is. It's just what I've heard down the line. It has a temperature gauge, oil pressure gauge, and by the way, there is no dipstick to check the oil on this tractor. Let me walk around here and show you how to check the oil. Somewhere right, where is it? I've lost it. Okay, I'm sorry y'all, I was a little confused. So this is actually the drain plug on the tractor, and that petcock that I showed you earlier, you actually open up this little part right here and there's a hole in the side. Can you see that? Can you see that hole? So whenever you're pouring engine oil in there, when you start to see oil come out of that hole, you know that you have enough oil in the engine. This is actually the oil filter. Oil filter there. I'm sorry, this is the oil filter, and I believe this is the oil pump. That's how you can actually drop the oil pump out of the engine. Again, look at how simple that is. To actually work on the oil pump, you don't have to take the crankcase apart. You don't have to drop the oil pan. There is no oil pan. It's all built into the frame of the tractor. So you just drop these bolts right here and boom, the oil pump drops out, you service it, put it back in. It's just too easy to work on this thing. So I intend to keep it going for a while. All right, so let's get on with how we actually crank this old thing. The very first thing you need to do before you even start playing with this tractor is to make sure it's out of gear. And also make sure the clutch is disengaged. All right, the way you know is that when you push it forward, you hear it click. There it is. Then you pull it back. And when you know you pulled it back and heard that click, the clutch is disengaged. Because you don't want this thing running over you, because you actually have to crank it from the ground. Okay. The very first thing that I do is I turn the gas on. Now I want you to watch something. I want you to watch inside this gas bowl and see if you see fuel kind of sort of swirling around in there when I turn the gas on. So pay attention. I don't know if you could see it or not. But anyway, it's full of fuel. I know that because I can see it. So it follows the fuel line all the way down to the carburetor. And at this moment, the carburetor is filling up with fuel. Now, the next thing I do, and this is kind of interesting on this old tractor. Remember, we're going to be spinning this to actually crank the engine, okay? Now I can't turn that over by hand right now because there's so much compression on the cylinders it would be impossible. So there is a petcock on this thing. I know that's a funny word to say. So you have to actually open the petcock up until it's straight out. Some folks like to do it even with that hole right there, but that's not right. You're actually supposed to push it straight out to where it is parallel to the ground. Now, let's go do that to the other side. There's the one for the other cylinder. Straight out, parallel to the ground. And by the way, this is the magneto. That's what provides the electrical spark to each one of the cylinders. And then when I crank in just a minute, you're going to hear a clicking sound. And that clicking sound is a spring-loaded action inside this magneto to where when it gets to a certain point, it clicks. It clicks over and it creates a magnetic field strong enough to send an electrical charge to the spark plug. Then, whenever the engine gets turning fast enough, it quits clicking, that clicking sound, and just operates normal, like a regular normal distributor. But in order to get that high energy boost, it's got to go fast. So if you had this thing open and looking at it, you would see the engine turn and then all of a sudden it'll click. And it'll click again for the second cylinder. So it does that fast so it gets enough electrical charge to send down to the plugs. Okay, the next thing that I've got to do is I've got to put the choke on. And to put the choke on, I run that all the way up. That's what I do, very first thing. And I also need to get the throttle at mid-throttle. So I'm gonna adjust the hand throttle here. And as I adjust it, I want you to watch. Okay, that is full throttle, and I'm gonna pull it back some. That is about half throttle. Let's go back. 0 throttle, full throttle, half throttle. That's where my engine cranks best, is on half throttle. Okay, so I've got my fuel on, I've got the choke turned on, I've got the petcocks opened up, I've got my throttle at mid-throttle. So, next thing I'm gonna do is start cranking on this flywheel, but I wanna set the tripod up so I can show you something. Remember me telling you that I found my secret for my tractor? So with the choke on, I'll actually turn until I start to see fuel coming out of this petcock. Then I will know to reach over here and cut the choke to half choke so I don't flood the engine while I'm cranking. So I'm gonna set the tripod up closely on this petcock so you can see the fuel come out, and then I'm gonna back up so you can see me actually crank the tractor. All right, hold tight. Okay, what I want you to do is watch this little hole right here where the end of my finger is. When you see fuel spray out of there, I'm gonna cut the choke off, then I'm gonna back the camera up, and let's see if we can get this whole thing cranked. So keep an eye on it, watch it. It'll take a few times. Oh, you see that little spray? Let's do it one more time. There it was. I hope you saw that. There's a little mist of fuel that came out. There, one more time. Okay, let me back the camera up and let's crank this whole thing up. Okay, now y'all don't laugh if I get a little winded here, because it takes a little muscle to make this happen. Because remember, I'm pushing against the compression of the engine with the help of this petcock open up to release some of that compression. Now, remember I told you I'm going to do half choke. I started seeing some fuel come out. So, you should be primed and ready to crank. Let's see what happens. Oh, I kind of wanted to. Okay, I had to come out here where I could actually hear you, or you hear me rather, and talk to you, because I'm going to shut down the tractor. I didn't explain that before I cranked it. It's too hard to crank back up to talk to you in the shop and then turn it off again. Well, the shutdown procedure is about as hard as the crank up procedure. Actually, you shut the fuel off and you wait for it to run out of gas, basically. So I'm going to go back in the shop. You may hear it running behind me. I'm going to shut the fuel down, and then I'll show you how long it takes to actually shut her down. So here we go. Oh, y'all, you gotta love these old tractors. It's like a bull in a china shop. I mean, really, literally. This was one step up from the mules. Matter of fact, that old John Deere M you saw out there, that was my granddaddy's tractor when they converted from mules to a tractor, and this was my uncle's. So it's just about as hard to crank it as it is to turn it off. But look, it was great technology of its time. And the reason I'm getting it out is I'm getting it ready for a Halloween, fall festival at the church to do a hayride with the kids. So that'll be fun with the old tractor. I'm gonna get her cleaned up real good, shined up, got a few things to paint on the wheels, and maybe slap a little paint on the hood to get her ready for the hayride. All right, God bless, take care. I hope you enjoyed this little video of how to crank a John Deere B.